Hello everyone and welcome back to the EDH Jank Center, your source for everything Commander and everything Jank. I am your host Jordan or Prairies, and today we're starting a new series called The Bulk Pile. In this series, we'll be rifling through that pile of bulk you have lying around and finding some pieces that we can fit into decks. It won't always be easy or even efficient, but that won't stop us because every card deserves a chance to shine. Alright, enough dilly-dallying kiddos, let's get our friggin' helmets on and let's go. Alright, now that our deck building helmets have been securely fastened, I'd like to bring your attention to our first janky cutie of the day. It's Burning Inquiry, 1 red mana sorcery from Magic 2010. Each player draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. So for me, what makes this card kind of janky is the sorcery speed and the discarding 3 cards at random. It can be kind of risky, and not every player wants to take that risk. But lucky for us, we remembered to put on our deck building helmets, and now any projectiles from up above we will be protected from. So let's get to building, shall we? So for me, I think Burning Inquiry would work great in a Bralin, Skyshark Rider, and Shabraz the Skyshark partner deck. They both read as follows. Bralin, Skyshark Rider is 3 in a red legendary creature human shaman from Commander 2020. Partner with Shabraz the Skyshark. When this creature enters the battlefield, target player may put Shabraz into their hand from their library, then shuffle. Whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Bralin Skyshark Rider and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. You can pay 1 red mana and target Shark gains trample until end of turn, and she's a 3/3. Meanwhile, underneath her, Shabraz the Skyshark says 3 white-blue. Legendary creature Shark Bird from Commander 2020. Partner with Bralin Skyshark Rider. Flying. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabraz the Skyshark and you gain 1 life. You can pay 1 white or blue. Target human gains flying until end of turn, and it's also a 3/3. So Burning Inquiry just nuzzles right into these two as a way to both draw cards and buff Shabraz, and discard cards and buff and group slug our opponents with Bralin. So when we draw the 3 cards off of Burning Inquiry, we're going to buff Shabraz up to a 6/6. We're also going to gain 3 life from that, and then when we discard the 3 cards at random, we're going to buff Bralin by 3, and we're going to deal 3 damage to each of our opponents. And doing that all for 1 mana in a color combo that really loves instants and sorceries and has lots of ways to recur a card like this. Very spicy, very dope include, and I think we're off to a great start, folks. Our next card out of our bulk pile is Crystalline Giant, 3 colorless mana artifact creature giant from Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose a kind of counter at random that Crystalline Giant doesn't have on it. From among Flying, First Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, Vigilance, and +1/+1. Put a counter of that kind on Crystalline Giant, and it's a 3/3. So as soon as I opened this in a pack, I was obsessed. I was trying to find a place for this in any and all of my personal decks, and I finally found one that I think I want to share with you guys. I personally slotted this into my own Orvar the All-Form deck. Orvar is 3 in a blue legendary creature, shapeshifter from Kaldheim. It has Changeling. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets 1 or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. When a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent, and it's a 3/3. So I built Orvar as a shapeshifter and clone tribal deck. I basically make your board into mine with a bunch of shapeshifters and clones. However, there are a couple creatures in there, like Crystalline Giant, for example, that I just really love the idea of making a bunch of copies of. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy building strong decks. I like to win games, just like any other person. However, when there's a chance to fit in janky, underutilized, and something I think is super fun and flavorful and cute, whatever it may be, I'm gonna do it, because at the end of the day, we're trying to have fun doing this thing, and why not make a bunch of giant, beefed up keyword crystal guys. And if your opponents don't leave this alone, genuinely, if you can make 4 to 5 copies of this card, you're gonna have some with Menace and Lifelink, some with Trample and a +1/+1 counter. The possibilities are super endless, and the longer they stay on the board, the more of a threat they all become, and I think that's really fun and super intimidating, and I've never seen that before, so I put it in my deck. I think you should put it in yours. All right, next up on the list, we have Stormcaller, 2 in a red, creature ogre shaman from Core Set 21. When Stormcaller enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to each opponent, and it's a 3/2. This one is too easy, folks. I have a Delina Wildmage deck that really gets to abuse this ability if we get lucky. And that's the beautiful thing about Delina, is it's all potential. It's all potential energy, if I can bring you back to 6th grade science. But before we go off the deep end, let me just read Delina real quick. She is 3 in a red, legendary creature elf shaman from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Whenever Delina Wildmage attacks, choose target creature you control, then roll a d20. 1 through 14, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary. legendary, and it has exile this creature at end of combat. If you roll a 15 through 20, create one of those tokens and you get to roll again, and she's a 3/2. What appealed to me about Delina in the first place was it's all about dice rolling and luck, and yes, you can get lucky. I've won on turn 5 with this deck, and I've done absolutely nothing in other games with this deck. So cards like Stormcaller are really fun to include because they're super cheap. You can build Delina on an ultra budget. Let me know if you'd like a deck tech in the comments. But if you can chain a couple of Stormcaller ETBs together, you're dealing a lot of damage to your opponents, and you combine that with damage multipliers like Gratuitous Violence, for example, and there's a bunch of others in red. That's a lot of damage really fast, and it makes this deck run like a freaking engine, boys. And not to mention, Delina makes attacking copies of all these tokens that we're abusing for the ETB and stuff. This is a 3/2 attacker as well, and that's potent in and of itself. So do not sleep on these beautiful little bulky boys, and let's move on. Second to last card on the list right now is Aspect of Hydra, 1 green mana instant from Born of the Gods. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is your devotion to green. Each green symbol in the mana costs of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to green. So this card seems pretty unassuming, but it's actually a finisher. Sorry, I think the Aspect of Hydra took me over. I'm tired. Anyways, this card is a huge buff if you have a bunch of green permanents that have lots of green pips in their mana cost. And if the creature you're buffing has trample already, this can spell a pretty quick end for your opponents. So I think a perfect home for this card would be Kosei Penitent Warlord, 1 green legendary creature Ogre Samurai from Neon Dynasty Commander. As long as Kosei Penitent Warlord is enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on it, Kosei has whenever Kosei Penitent Warlord deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards, and Kosei deals that much damage to each other opponent. And he's a 0/5. So pretty simple tech here. We have to make sure that Kosei has trample first with equipment, or ideally auras, or even a trample counter. But we want the green auras because they have lots of green pips in their mana cost, and Aspect of Hydra, our finisher, really cares about the green pips. So we get Kosei all suited up with mostly auras, equipment, and probably some +1/+1 counters. We swing, we cast Aspect of Hydra, we buff him up even more, and then we deal a bunch of damage to our one opponent, and then we draw a bunch of cards, and we deal that much damage to each of our opponents as well. So let's say with our Aspect of Hydra, he becomes a 15/15, he deals 15 damage. The person he deals the 15 damage to is actually going to take another 15 after his ability triggers. So we're in essence dealing 30 total damage with Kosei to one person and 15 to each of our other opponents. That's very busted, very dope. Just like the EDH Jank Center, baby. Let's go. Well, would you look at that? We are almost at the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you dug the video, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. All your support helps me out so much. Also, if you have some janky cards that you'd like me to find homes for, if you'd like me to rifle through your bulk piles, let me know in the comments. I'm always down there in the comments responding to everyone and having chats, so come on down and geek out with us. All right, so this last card is definitely the jankiest of all of them. It's Soldier of Fortune, 1 red mana, summon Mercenary from Alliances. Pay 1 red and tap. Target player shuffles his or her library, and he's a 1/1. So obviously, I'm about to explain my way of doing things with this card, but if you can come up with a better way to use this, let me know in the comments. I'm honestly genuinely curious, because this was pretty hard for me. But luckily, I have my good old trusty helmet on, and I came up with Elsha of the Infinite. 2 blue, red, white legendary creature Jin Monk from Commander 2019. She has prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast the top card of your library if it's a non-creature, non-land card, and you may cast it as though it had flash. And she's a 3/3. So yeah, just if you don't like the top card of your library, you just pay 1 and you shuffle your library, and then you can look at the new card at the top of your library. Yeah, that's it. And I will have no attitude from any one of you, because I said at the beginning of the video it wasn't always going to be efficient or even good or something like that. Anyways, let me off the hook, kiddos. I found a use for it. You should put it in the deck if you want to have some funsies. And before we know it, we are already at the end of the video, guys. If you stuck around this far, thank you so much for watching. If you really dig the content, make sure you check out the Patreon. The link is in the description. I have lots of cool benefits for patrons, including a patron-only Discord where we discuss our favorite cards, favorite jank, have all sorts of discussions, and we also organize spell tables with me, and you guys can organize spell table games amongst yourselves if you're all patrons. You should also consider becoming a patron, because if you're curious about having a full deck list of any of the commanders I mentioned in today's video or any of my other videos on the channel, I hold monthly polls for patrons where you guys get to choose what I get to make next. With all that being said, I thank you guys so much again, and I'll see you on the next video.